It's a privilege to be here. Thank you so much. We are very honoured to be part of the finalists, and really thank you to BGA and to all of you guys. Each of you have a piece of limestone on your table in front of you, which I'll explain what that is in a moment. My name is Chris Turner. I am a co-founder of KulaDAO, which we started about 3 years ago. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce you to Mahalia, who actually produced that limestone that's on the table in front of you. She has a couple of kids, and I had the privilege of being at the limestone mine that we invested into about 14 months ago. And I asked her, what do you dream? What's your dream? And I think for every single person in this room, if I ask you that question, this morning at some point or in the last few days, you've thought you're aspiring to something, and given the focus of what we're talking about here, we've all got pretty utopian ideals of what we're going for and utilising blockchain to go for that. And each of us have aspirations, right, on a hierarchy of needs. We've got very high aspirational dreams. Mahalia's dream was for a road. That was her answer. And it made me really curious. It's like, well, why a road? And she unpacked that for me. She said, every day my kids walk 3 hours to school and they walk 3 hours back. And I would love a road, because if we have a road, we can have a bus. We can have a bus and get more time with my kids. Fundamentally, underneath, I believe, under Sustainable Development Goals, really is the power for people to make choices is the key to sustainable living and sustainable choices for them. If you're cold and there's no choice for you, you're going to burn a plastic bag to stay warm, right? This whole project came out to address real-world issues like this from 25 years working in international development. I've worked for most UN departments on various different consultancies and bilateral, multilateral aid agencies. And after several years in the career, I was working for the Global Fund on an assessment in a country in Asia. And we were assessing a $2.5 billion project and its impact on the ground. And after we did the assessment, we found out that only $300,000 had actually got to grassroots interventions. And we did the assessment, it actually got broken in the Washington Post and New York Times, and the country just cut a check back to the UN for the money that they had taken for that intervention, rather than it going into a much more long drawn-out scandal. That for me was the straw that broke the camel's back, because I'd observed time and time again the same type of process where lots of promises made, but what actually gets down into grassroots intervention doesn't necessarily translate to reality. And I kept asking the question for years, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? In 2017, I was sat where you guys are at a blockchain conference in this very room. And I listened to a man from Maersk Shipping talking about blockchain provenance. And I didn't really know about blockchain or crypto. Well, at that point, I came to learn. But I sat and I thought, this is the key. There is a way to utilize smart contracts to lock decision-making and equity in the favor of stakeholders that usually miss out or lose out in the projects that they are living, like the assets they live on, or the project that happens around them. So essentially, this is what we're doing with KulaDAO. We utilize smart contracts. We put investments into real-world assets, and then we use blockchain to align interests of the stakeholders. Each individual stakeholder gets equity in the overall project. That's diversified. They get a vote. They get a participatory voice. And from that, we start to see impacts. So I'm working at a very abstractive level because of time. But in Zambia, this is a well that we were able to dig in the community next to the limestone mine. And we're hitting various different sustainable development metrics. So the 232 metrics that sit under the 169 targets that sit under those 17 sustainable development goals, we can measure at a fairly granular level where we're impacting the community in the various different areas. In Nepal, we're working with a hydropower project, which is working in clean energy. We're also going to be building data centers in that particular area, and then utilizing those different data centers for new IT services in Nepal, and also some Bitcoin mining. And then Malaysia, we've got a third country that we're also working in a timber project, which is regenerative timber, and then nanotech in the agriculture, which is kind of changing the way that the regenerative process occurs in that particular area in Sarawak. Fundamentally, our smart contracts are really giving every stakeholder ownership and governance, right? And we think that creates stewardship. So at some of the granular levels of how that works, in terms of how the contracts work and the DAO-based technology works underneath that, means that communities can start feeding the decision-making processes. So stakeholders are all given tokens. They have the right to be able to make their choices. And as an example, in Zambia, the stakeholders, they made a choice for men and women to get paid the same, which became the first mine in southern African region for men and women to get pay equity. So we're hitting that gender equality metric in the SDGs. That follows through to development iteration and into community feedback. They also gave themselves, voted for $1 a day pay rise, which, as you guys know, in that particular area, it's like a 50% pay rise for them. That's catalysed new microeconomic opportunities, new forms of agriculture. They're growing tomatoes, for example, in that particular area, where before they're importing those tomatoes in at 3 times the price. So there's better nutrition, and we're starting to see those types of impacts through the investments that we've made. We partner pretty extensively. So here's just one example of what they do in the ground AI, IoT assessment of what assets are in the ground, which gives us a really good investment forward-thinking opportunity, strategic opportunity, knowing that we're investing in the right assets with the right types of quality, whether that's water or the various different asset classes that we do invest in. We're also working with WorldCom, which is a deep in IoT node provider that allows us to get ICT into the communities and the remote communities that we work with. So we're pretty much integrating and trying to collaborate, and actually really excited to talk to different groups here today and see where there's potential collaborative opportunities together. And then a global footprint. We work in Africa and Asia. We've got we've got 6 projects that are lined up in those 3 countries, and then we have several more that are applying, and then we vet those investments through a fairly elaborate process, a risk management process. And also in terms of all of the wallets that are given to local community members, we run them through a fairly robust KYC and AML process to meet regulatory standards and make sure that we're compliant at the international level. Her dream is our dream, and we're really excited that that road is going to be delivered very soon in that community from the profits that are generated from the asset that we've invested in, as they make the choice to build that road and start a small bus company. That means she's going to get more time with her kids, and we just believe, again, that sovereign choice that each individual often doesn't get in these types of development projects through what we're trying to achieve is moving the needle to demonstrate where we can see that impact at a fairly substantive level. That's KulaDAO. Please do follow us. The links are there, and I'm very happy to take any of your questions.